And good evening and welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guests this evening are Stephanie Arcangelo and Neil Brockway from the American Red Cross Connecticut chapters. Stephanie, welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks
Neil,
for having us.
good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Doing very well, very
Good.
well. Very glad to be here.
Good. Well, welcome back. It's been since November, I believe.
I think
November.
Spring, I think.
Spring. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, how's everybody been? Everybody doing okay?
Yeah, it's been a very busy time at the American Red Cross. So.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Stephanie, what exactly do you do for the American Red Cross, and how long have you been there?
I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the American Red Cross Connecticut and Rhode Island region.
Okay.
And so I've been there for just about 4 years this month. And it's my job to do interviews like this and to share information with the media and our community partners as well to make sure that people know what we're doing and how people can get help if they need it.
And Neil, what about you?
I'm the Regional Disaster Officer for the Connecticut and Rhode Island region, so I manage our preparedness, response, and recovery programs within both states. And then during larger scale disasters across the country, I deploy out to those large scale disasters in usually a management or an operations role and run the operations.
You like it?
I do. I've been with the Red Cross. I actually, a couple days ago, I celebrated my 11th year anniversary with the Red Cross.
There you go.
So I do indeed love it.
There you go. Stephanie, I was looking at some notes this afternoon, getting prepared for tonight, and one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is the blood shortage.
Yeah, so
what's going on?
So just last week, the American Red Cross launched an emergency blood appeal. So right now, the need for blood is critical. We need folks to roll up their sleeves and come out and to donate blood if they're eligible. Folks can find a blood drive near them by visiting redcrossblood.org or downloading the Red Cross Blood Donor app. Traditionally, summer is one of the most difficult times to collect blood, summer and winter. Summertime because folks are planning vacations, and as 20% of our blood drives come from high school and college campuses, which we know are out of session for the summer. Also, around the 4th of July holiday, we see a lot of our volunteer blood sponsors not hosting blood drives, and when that happens, we're not able to collect the blood, but the need for blood is constant. Every 2 seconds, someone in the U.S. needs blood. So right now, if you're eligible to donate blood, we really need you to do that.
Now, what makes you eligible to go ahead and donate blood?
So you have to be at least 17 years of age or older in the state of Connecticut with parental consent, and there's height and weight requirements. I think you have to weigh at least 110 pounds, and you can donate whole blood every 56 days. Now, only about 10% of the population is actually even eligible to donate blood, but less than 3% actually do. So there are about 7% of the population that is eligible to donate, and they're simply not coming out. And so we want to let folks know that the need for blood is constant, that you can help hospital patients in need, and for just about an hour of your time, you can help save up to 3 lives.
Now, when you just mentioned the word whole blood, what do you mean by whole blood?
So whole blood is our red cells. So when you give blood, when you go into the blood drive, it takes about an hour, and what happens is you donate a pint of whole blood, and then later that blood is separated into red cells, plasma, and platelets. It takes about 5 people or so to get a platelet donation, and so the platelets are clotting components, and that goes to help burn victims and also cancer patients. So when you go to a regular blood drive, you're donating what we call whole blood. You can also come to our Farmington office and you can donate platelets. Platelets takes a little bit longer. It takes about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and what happens is they are taking your blood out, they are separating out the platelets, and they're returning the plasma and the whole red cells back into your body. So it takes a little bit longer, but from that you're getting that full platelet donation, and those only have a shelf life of 5 days. So from the time that they take them out and the time that they're tested, they're going to folks who are really in an urgent need for that blood product. So you might be eligible to donate platelets or whole blood. If you are, visit redcrossblood.org to make an appointment.
Now, what's the shelf life for whole blood?
It's every 42 days.
Okay.
So you can donate whole blood every 56 days, but the shelf life is only 42 days. So it constantly has to be replenished. It's not something that can be stockpiled. Right now, we are distributing blood faster than it's coming in. We don't know of any surgeries or anything like that that have been postponed, but that is a very real possibility. So we want to make sure that we have that blood for those patients in need, and all types are currently needed, especially O negative. It's the universal blood type.
It is? Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the O negative blood can be transfused into anyone, especially trauma patients when they don't have time to type your blood if you're in an accident. O negative can be transfused into anyone.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
And Neil, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, just to echo on the point that the need for blood is constant.
Yes.
You know, as right now it's summertime, the sun is shining. People aren't thinking about this, but if I go back to last hurricane season with Hurricane Harvey and Irma,
right.
The number of blood drives that had to be canceled as a result of those significant events, and we think about that all the time when we have these big disasters, that when a hurricane's coming ashore, we obviously can't have blood drives, and so that further highlights the need for blood products. And so we really want to encourage people, when the sun is shining, donate now so we can have the products on the shelf available. So when a big storm does happen, or a hurricane, or a wildfire out in California, that we do have the products that we can deal with that shortage that comes through the cancellation of those blood drives due to significant disasters.
Now, if somebody walks into give blood, somebody walks in, hi, I want to give blood. What's the process? What can they expect?
Sure. So it'll take about an hour. It'll start with registration. You'll go through an information booklet. It'll mention certain types of medications that might defer you from donating blood, certain information about travel, things like that. If you actually go online beforehand and you download a Rapid Pass, you can actually answer your health history questions in advance, which will save you about 15 minutes in your appointment. So once you read through the booklet and you let them know that you're ready, when it's your time, they'll call you into a confidentiality booth, and you'll meet with one of our Red Cross workers, and what they'll do there is give you a little mini physical. So they're going to prick your finger to check your iron levels, they're going to take your temperature to make sure that you're feeling well and healthy, and then they're going to take your blood pressure. Then they're going to go ahead and review the questions. You're either going to answer them right there, or if you've already answered them via the Rapid Pass, they're going to go over any additional information that they may need from you. And if everything checks out and everything is good to go, they'll take you over and they'll begin the blood drawing process, which that part only takes about 10 minutes. And once you're done with that, you're going to go over and have a little snack, have some cookies, have some juice, get that blood sugar back up, have some water, and in about 10-15 minutes, you're going to be good to go, and you would have helped save up to 3 lives.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
In just about an hour, you think about how you can impact people that way, someone that you've never met before. And I know from my 4 years working at the Red Cross, I've met so many people who have needed blood. And just recently in my life, I've had friends who've actually needed blood due to cancer. And so it's amazing that you're able to give back in that way. You're able to give a part of yourself.
Now, as far as, besides, you guys also do other points of interest besides blood. I also think we're going to talk about swimming.
Yeah.
Swimming safety.
Yeah, so right now we're in the middle of July, and it's a hot one out there.
It is.
We've had a significant heat wave this summer, and we really want to make sure that folks understand the importance of swimming safety. So really, you want to make sure that if you have a pool, you want to make sure that you're fenced in, you have a pool or a hot tub. You want to make sure if you are a parent or you're watching children, you're watching them at all times. Also, having approved life jackets is really important. We know that people like to use the swimmies or have flotation devices in the pool, but that's really no replacement for an approved life jacket. And also, if you're an adult who is responsible for watching children, if you don't know how to swim, you're not going to be able to help your children if there was an emergency. So we encourage all adults to make sure that they know how to swim, and you can do that by visiting redcross.org/take-a-class. For those who do know how to swim and they may want to become a lifeguard, we encourage you to go on redcross.org as well, and you can help teach swimming safety or become a lifeguard.
And how I guess, how hard is it to become a lifeguard?
Well, you know, you're going to have to take some classes,
Yeah.
and they're going to go over the basics, and you're going to have to also know CPR, first aid,
Right.
all of that sort of thing, and there is a test that's involved with that. But really, when once you're kind of certified and you're certified to become a swimming instructor like we have at the Red Cross, you're going to teach the 5 critical skills that everyone needs to know to be water safe. And those 5 skills mean that you can step off or jump into the water that's over your head, that you can tread water or float for at least a minute, that you can turn around in a full circle, swim 25 yards, and get yourself out of a pool by yourself without a ladder, or be able to get yourself out of the ocean. So those are the 5 critical skills that everyone needs to know to be a solid swimmer. And even if you are a solid swimmer and you have those skills down, you always want to swim in pairs and near a lifeguard's chair. Drowning can happen at any time. It happens quickly.
Totally.
And so we want people to be safe.
Exactly. Exactly.
Something else I would add is that the Red Cross is our mission is to help people during emergencies, and whatever those emergencies are, whether it's a medical emergency of needing blood or a swimming drowning type of incident. But I would strongly encourage, in addition to the swimming safety, for parents out there, especially parents of kids where you've taken to the pool, you've taken to the beach, is that to really ensure that you're not only that you're trained in CPR, so that if something does happen, you're prepared to be able to be that support until the medical personnel, the ambulance, can arrive. And I think one of the things that's a little bit disconcerting is that if you look at what we all see of drowning in movies and things like that, it sounds very noisy and there's a lot of splashing, and it seems like we would all recognize what a drowning victim looks like. But drowning is actually very quiet and it's very silent. And that's what most drowning looks like, is it doesn't look like anything at all. And so lifeguards are trained to recognize that, but I really encourage anyone that is a parent, that is in charge of taking care of children at pools, that they really need to get trained in CPR, so they can better ensure that there is a beneficial outcome if there is an event. I recently spoke to a woman who was able to, through CPR, was able to save her 3-year-old child who had fallen in a pool. And when she brought the child out, the child was not breathing, and she was able to administer CPR and revive her child. And so, these tragic things happen, and they happen, unfortunately, on a regular basis, and especially during the summer months. This is when drowning is a big issue, and we just want to encourage and give everybody the tools to ensure that they can effectively respond during those emergencies. So we encourage people to go on to redcross.org, look up information on swimming safety, on blood donations, as well as where people can sign up for CPR classes.
Excellent. Would you guys mind sticking around for another segment?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.
Alvin and the Chipmunks want to remind you, bacteria can hide in food and make you ill.
Wow.
But you can keep bacteria from ruining your day with 4 simple steps. Clean.
I'm waiting for the rinse cycle.
Separate. Cook.
Fire in the hole!
And chill.
We chipmunks are notoriously tidy.
Check your steps. The road trip to food safety starts at foodsafety.gov.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. Sitting here with Stephanie Arcangelo and Neil Brockway from the American Red Cross Connecticut chapter. Guys, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Neil, Stephanie and I did a good amount of talking in the first segment. So I guess you and I are going to open this second segment and talk about hurricane preparedness.
Absolutely.
Which you're an expert in.
Yes.
And so is Stephanie.
Yes.
Yes. I'm like, I hope so.
Yes.
We sure are.
Exactly. So what do we want to? Where do you want to start?
Well, one thing I would say is, when we talk about hurricanes or think about hurricanes, people in New England sometimes don't I would say, fully appreciate the hurricane risk that does exist in New England. We think of hurricanes as Florida and Texas and the Gulf Coast and the Carolinas, but we do have a history, a long history, up here in New England and in Connecticut of being impacted by some pretty significant events. You know, if you trace back the records all the way from 300 years ago, there's stories of massive storms impacting New England, all the way up to, you know, the 38 storm that impacted storms in the 50s, the 60s, back to Sandy, Irene, and so we do have a long history of significant weather here in Connecticut, and as New England is more populated than it was back in the 30s and the 50s and the 60s, it's something that we have to be prepared for. And so there are steps that every New Englander needs to take in order to ensure that as we approach the peak hurricane season in August and September, that we are prepared for any sort of event that may happen.
And what are some of those prepared steps that people can take to make sure that they are prepared?
So the first one is you have to understand where your risk is. And this is the challenge, is a lot of times people are, they think about hurricanes and they're scared of the wind. And while wind is a significant factor, most people die in hurricanes as a result of the water. And so here we are along the coast, and so there are a lot of people who live along the coast, there's a lot of people who live along inland rivers. And so the main killer, as I mentioned, during hurricanes is that storm surge, that water that's pushed ashore through the combination of low pressure and the high winds. And so every community and every town has a hurricane storm surge zone. So you want to know if you live along the coast, if you live within one of those storm surge zones. And then it's important that if you do live in one of those storm surge zones, if you do have a storm, that you listen and pay attention to the warnings and the calls to evacuate. You do not want to be trying to ride out your home in a storm surge zone during one of those storms, because many times you'll hear during hurricanes that fire department, law enforcement, 911 services, they aren't able to provide evacuation or emergency services during a hurricane. And so if you do decide to remain in your home, then you are on your own. There's no one there to help you evacuate. And that's unfortunately how people die during these events. Is because they weren't able to get those emergency services, and so the help was not able to arrive. And so got to keep and make sure that people are knowing where their risk is, and then for the people that are more inland, recognizing that wind is going to be an issue. You have to be prepared for the power outage that is going to happen, and it could be a long-term duration power outage, and so you need to make sure that you have a kit. And so in the type of hurricane kit that you have, you want to make sure you have food, fresh water, flashlights, batteries, and essentially medications and other types of things that you need to basically survive on your own for several days after the event.
Now, how many, for the preparedness kit with the food, the water, and the medication, how many days in advance, how many days of a stockpile, I guess, should you have for each person?
Generally, it's about 3 to 7 days for each person. I would end on that. I would go a little bit towards the 7 days. And the reason I say that specifically, one of our risks here in New England, if we look back to the 1938 storm, the 1938 storm knocked down about 90% of the trees in Connecticut. So if you think about what 90% of the trees looks like, if you go outside, you see these dense forests that we have. We're going to deal with not only the power issues that come down with that, but also the trees all over the road. So it's going to be very difficult to move around the state and to navigate. And so you want to make sure that you have enough food stockpiled in your home so that you can be able to stay there, with a recognition that, in many locations, the priorities for road clearing are going to be areas near hospitals, near shelters, and things like that. So if you live out in a rural location and you're not on one of those critical essential routes, you may be stuck for days, maybe weeks, in one of these worst case scenarios.
And one of the things to add too is that when you are able to get out, one of the things that people kind of forget about when we're preparing is they should be filling up their gas tanks in advance, as well as accessing cash. We saw when the power goes out, you can't use your credit card. I mean, you can't access an ATM. Oh. So, so you want to make sure that you have the cash available and that you have a full tank of gas, because it will take you an extended period of time. And remember, hurricanes are notice events. So we're lucky that we have the technology now in this day and age for forecasting. We know know that sometimes a big hype will be made and then maybe it will miss us. But other times we're not so lucky, and sometimes the hurricane will change its path and it will give you a little less time. So having that preparedness kit ready now and really heeding those evacuation warnings are key to protect yourself as well as your community and your first responders.
Exactly.
And these are low-cost options. Again, our advice is to make sure that you have your medications, your food for 3 to 7 days. We're not asking you to go out and build a bunker and build something for 4 years or anything like that. But it's really these types of measures that allow you to be more self-sufficient. Because the last thing that you want to have is have no power and then have no food, have no medications for your family, for your kids, and have no way to communicate and have no way to get out. That's where we really find, and we found people, and that's the situation that many people find themselves in, because unfortunately is people think, oh well, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen this way. And that's the general human thought when it comes to disasters, is that it's not going to happen. It's not going to be that bad. I went through one a couple years ago and I didn't have this thing. And so again, by having some basic plans in place and working with your family to ensure that they have their basic plans in place. You know, the other thing that I think about here in southern England, New England, is that we have a larger elderly population. And so I want to make sure that children with elderly parents, they're making sure that their parents have a place to go. Whether that means ensuring that they're evacuated to their home or evacuated to a shelter during one of those types of events, but everybody has a plan for what they're going to do, and you have that conversation now. Because again, while a hurricane is a notice event, there are some days in ahead advance. It may be a relatively short amount of time. We want to make sure that people have their plans in place now. So now, when the sun is shining and it's warm outside, is the time to have that conversation for, where's my mother going to go? Where's my father going to go? Do I have kids that have just gone off to college? Where are they going to go? Right. So we have the conversation now to ensure that we're not trying to do this at the last minute, right before a storm's coming.
No, because if you do it right before a storm's coming at the last minute, it's going to be like, oh no. What do I do?
Absolutely.
Or, oh no, I need this, 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 and this. How do I get it? It's
absolutely. And then you're going to be trying to vie for the 100 other thousand people that are trying to do the same thing.
Right, exactly, exactly. And I know we talked about this before when we were getting ready to tape tonight, talking about natural disasters and everything going on in the world. Locally, what happened with the microburst and the tornado that touched over on New Haven County not long ago. You guys were very instrumental in that operation as well. Let's talk about that.
You know, I think I can start by saying that it's really important that folks pay attention to the weather, and when you get those warnings, when we saw the warning that said tornado warning, take shelter now, that is what we did. And we were in the basement of our Farmington facility, and we waited it out there until it was safe for us to leave. But where there was a significant amount of damage, and Neil can talk about our response, but we were out there and it was very significant, and I believe the folks, you know, a lot of them had to stay in their homes for a lot longer than they had originally anticipated with the power going out.
Exactly.
So, you know, I moved up to New England 2 years ago from Texas, and so I was very familiar, and I've worked a lot of different tornado responses, a lot of different severe weather events. And I was still surprised, and they still surprised me with and it surprised me with the level of devastation that happened. And so we had this macro burst, so this area of about 3 miles wide by 9 miles long, about 100 and 115 mile per hour winds. And so moving through Brookfield and New Fairfield and other communities, what happened was it didn't directly damage the house, but it dropped and felled these really large trees that in some cases crushed homes, split homes in two, and I think unfortunately 2 people lost their lives in that event. And then other tornadoes hit other communities around, and so at the end of the event, around 400 homes either had significant structural damage or were destroyed as a result. And we had tens of thousands of other people that were impacted by trees down, by power outages. And we were just talking about during a tropical event, a hurricane, the amount of damage that potentially happened with trees being down. We had, some people without power for multiple weeks after this event, people that were stuck in their homes, and this was just a small area of Connecticut. Now imagine that kind of event spread across the entirety of New England, especially the southern New England and portions of New Jersey and New York, and the amount of impact that would be, which is why I always say this, and I say I'm a broken record at work, as I'm trying to tell people, this is why we have to be prepared. A lot of people were caught off guard by that storm, but the reality is that storm was predicted. The National Preparedness Center, the Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma, which issues these forecasts, had issued a forecast that we were expecting severe weather that day. But again, because severe weather like it is in Texas or Oklahoma and Kansas, where it's something of a regular occurrence once a week during severe weather season, tornadoes and macrobursts are not as frequent up here in southern New England. But it does happen. Yeah. So while hurricanes are not as frequent as they are in Florida or the Gulf Coast, they do happen. So we've got to be prepared for them.
Of course they do. Now, we talked about storms and tropical storms, and the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center out of, I believe, Norman, Oklahoma. How does the Weather Service name their storms?
Yeah. So the National Hurricane Center names their storms. They're on a 7-year rotation.
Okay.
And so 1 year will start, and they go between male and female names, and so they have them named so on a 7-year rotation, names will start to be recycled.
Gotcha.
Now, if a storm is particularly destructive, the National Hurricane Center will retire that name. So names like Irma and Maria and Harvey from last year, those are all retired, so they will not show back up in the rotation.
Those won't show up again.
Yeah. And then they'll assign, within their teams, a new name, but those are determined by the National Hurricane Center.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You taught me something I didn't know.
I'll put in a word and they name a Hurricane Pete in there.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. No, because then they'll think it's all my fault. Before we say goodnight, well, you know what? We're about to say goodnight. So before we do, I want to thank you guys for coming down. Stephanie Arcangelo and Neil Brockway from the American Red Cross Connecticut chapter. Thanks for coming down. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's it for tonight's show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.